10 minutes ago. Yeah, he is. Yes.
How are you?
I just saw him about 10 minutes ago. His
appearance, unfortunately,
yeah.
a good person. We have a time share all week. Off season, but I don't mind that.
I enjoy it. Yeah, I was with him. Yeah, me too. I was with him today. Yes. Yeah, but the whole time. That never faltered. No, I didn't. Exactly.
What? I was going to say, go early and turn it. Oh, I paid. That was crazy. This year,
I'm better.
local races, and lesser races. I got snooker into.
Sure, that's good. Okay, good evening, everybody, and to everybody in the audience today, and to everybody watching at home. Today is November 3rd. This is the Development and Governmental Subcommittee and Governmental Relations Subcommittee to Holyoke City Council. That's easy for me to say. With me is Councilor Joe McGivern, Councilor Mike Sullivan, Councilor Pete Tallman is on his way, and I believe Councilor Nelson Roman is on his way. And the first item on our agenda, which was posted, by the way, we posted the agenda, so we complied, open meeting, so we're real proud of that, is acceptance of the previous meeting minutes. So if I could get a motion to take that up.
Motion to make a motion to receive and accept.
Second.
As written.
Just under discussion, they look great. Ryan did a good job. Anyone else? On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. Motion number 2, please.
Motion to receive and take off the table.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. This is always one of the favorite parts for me of this committee when we change the dynamic of it to make it the governmental relations part. So this committee was always redevelopment, looking at redevelopment in the city, and I never liked that name, but so we changed it to development, and we added the governmental relations so we could bring in folks that have stakeholders, elected officials, folks that have interest in Holyoke City government. So today we have with us the new superintendent of the Holyoke Soldiers Home, Bennett Walsh from Springfield. So Bennett, why don't you come on in, grab a seat here, if you would be so kind. And there's a little button in front of you on the mic. Oh, that's the bad one. Councilor McGivern. Wow, look at this, Johnny on the spot. So Colonel Walsh, we're really honored to have you tonight before us. So what we kind of like to do in this case is why don't you take the time to introduce yourself, and then take a few minutes to talk about how you see the Soldiers Home fitting it within the context of the city, and then take it from there. So for those watching at home, I'm just going to briefly say Bennett Walsh comes from an incredibly distinguished Springfield family. We're really lucky to have him. His father's a Vietnam War hero. His mother is a legendary Springfield City Councilor, so no pressure on him to step up. But he also has some wonderful brothers and his sisters, Mary Lee and Laura, just none better. So with that, Colonel Walsh, welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. What an honor, may I say. I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with not only this committee, but also with the citizens of Holyoke. It's really an honor. As I was talking to Mr. Carl, who I met earlier this evening, it really is such an honor to be selected to head such a wonderful facility that means so much, not only to Holyoke, but to Western Mass and our country. So I'll kind of get into that a little bit in my comments. But again, good evening to everyone on TV land as well, and thank you for those kind words. It's always nice when my family's mentioned, my mom and dad, who I'm very proud to be their son, and my brothers and sisters who, with their help, I'm able to be here this evening. Throughout my time in the military, they helped me, help my wife Shannon and I, and our kids throughout our numerous deployments. As a history for myself, I just recently retired from the Marine Corps. I was a lieutenant colonel. I served 24 years in our Corps. It's our birthday is in a couple days. As you mentioned, I grew up in Springfield. I left in 1988. I left, and I was thinking when the last time I was in this hall, I was looking at the walls here for the different mayors. Mayor Sullivan used to open for the St. Patrick's Day parade. I'd have it open. I remember having some, I think it was clam chowder or potato chowder in his office. So this is really neat. I think that was in 2009. That was really cool time. So I left Springfield and did the Marine Corps for 24 years. I was very fortunate. I was able to participate in several combat operations in Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan, and also in the humanitarian operations, humanitarian assistance disaster relief in Japan when the tsunami hit in 2011. But along the way, I met just wonderful men and women in the military, in the Marines, all branches, and I was fortunate enough to meet my wife during that time, and married and all over to raise 4 children, kind of all over the world, to include Japan. So now, incredibly humbled to be selected to be the superintendent of the Soldiers Home in Holyoke. It's I actually almost underestimated just how awesome it would be. Just recently spoke to the governor, and he said, how's it going? I said, it's a million times better than I thought it would be, because I liken the term of there's a term in the news, they call it the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. And I said, there's the 6 degrees of the Soldiers Home, because you can't go about 1 or 2 people deep to find some connection. Either their father was there, they worked there. It's amazing what that institution has, what that facility, that home has done since 1952. And as you gentlemen know, most of the people in this chambers, it's coming up on its 65th year. So it's really, it's humbling to be there, but it's also, such a noble mission. And I really love being there with my fellow veterans, but also with the wonderful, almost 400 caregivers we have at the home. It's really unbelievable. And just something that just surprised me was the level of dedication, not only from our caregivers. I was thinking I left an operation, an organization that I'd been at for 24 years. There's many fellow employees who have been there over 30 years, and it's just impressive, their dedication. But also the families. The families are there some every day to visit their loved ones, and that is just, it's inspiring to see, as well as our volunteer force that helps out with the Soldiers Home in regards to not only the time, but the donations to make it just the fabric of the city of Holyoke. I was trying to get my words together properly, and I really think that it's so ingrained in the city of Holyoke and all of Western Mass and Massachusetts, as you gentlemen know and Chambers knows. There's only 2 in the state of Massachusetts, and I think it's such a wonderful facility that I'm just honored to be there. And with your indulgence, I'd like to just kind of give some background for the last year, what the home's been through, and look ahead for 2017 if that works for you.
Please do.
And please let me know if there's any questions. Please stop me, because I'll keep right on. I'll keep right on here as I'm talking. Happy to announce that in the past year, the Soldiers Home passed its joint accreditation, which is a 3-year accreditation, and that's on the hard work of our caregivers, from our maintenance folks to our housekeepers to our primary nurse care personnel. We were able to pass that in April, and that gives us full accreditation by the Joint Commission for 3 years. In addition to that, we passed our VA inspection, the Veterans Administration inspection, which happens every January, and we passed that inspection as well with flying colors, based on the level of care that we provided. And during that time, a big takeaway from that was that the VA had to instruct us that our bed capacity was over the normal amount that's allowed by space. So unfortunately, we had to reduce our bed space from 265 beds, long-term care, to 250 beds. So now, actually, over the course of the year, we had to reduce from 265 to 250, which is unfortunate, because the needs of our veterans is always going to outweigh the capacity. Really, we'd need a facility of 500 beds to fully support all our wonderful veterans. In addition to that, the good news for going forward is, as everyone knows, it's tough times right now. For not only budget-wise, it's tough for everyone. Whereas other facilities, such as Parks and Recreation, for example, have had their budget modified a bit. The Soldiers Home has not had its budget reduced in any way from the year before, which is good. We're hoping to continue that going forward. And some of the initiatives that we have for 2017 is the state has authorized a walking path creation on site. Many of our veterans walk every day around the facility, and that's going to come in the springtime. We'll have that constructed. We'll have a nice ceremony, for that for the entire home and the community. In addition, we're going to increase the number of what we call our quiet rooms, which is just a facility within our comfort care units that allows for one of our members who may be having a tough time to receive some special time with some special alone time in a good way, where he or she is allowed to receive some special care from our from our nurses and our clinical specialists. That's very exciting that that's coming along. In addition, we recently awarded by the state a $50,000 study to benefit not only the facility but also the city of Holyoke, where they're going to look at all our energy that we use and try to go green to reduce our energy output. In addition, they're going to see if our facility can be a shelter in place for the city of Holyoke in case of any, obviously, a bad situation occurring. That is part of a bigger budget for the state that's $14 million for the entire state. We're hoping that when we do the study that they realize there's some money of the $14 million that they can put into the soldiers' home, which will be a win-win for everyone. So we're really excited about that for the coming year. In addition, next year is our 65th actual anniversary. I was told April 25th is, as you know, one of the reasons the soldiers' home has been out for that long is for gentlemen, previous superintendents, and many other people, not only elected officials like your father as well, who helped keep the soldiers' home in Holyoke. We're very excited about that. It kind of corresponds with just this past last week that the soldiers' home, for the first time in our 64-year history, was selected as a polling site for the city of Renewal, which Miss Brenna McGee had approached me as well as former councilor, now state representative Aaron Vega, and asked if we would like to be the facility for that, and I said that would be absolutely outstanding. And I just assumed that everything's kind of happened at the service home over the last 65 years, but that had not occurred. So I was very excited that we were selected for that, and we had not only veterans at the home be able to vote, but also our fellow neighbors in the city of Holyoke. And it was a grand slam, home run experience for not only our veterans, but for the city of Holyoke. So very, very thankful. Is my time up? No, just kidding. Was very thankful that we were selected to do that. It was just, I think, a nice way of how everyone is welcomed with open arms, not only through Holyoke, but throughout Western Mass. Just like examples like this of just to come and meet people and elected officials and wonderful organizations that support the soldiers' home. So we're looking at birthday celebration for 2017. But our coalition, which I'm happy to announce, and I couldn't say that my first month or so just because I didn't know at the time, but after being there for a 3-month period, and I'm starting on my 5th month, that the level of care that our caregivers provide is second to none. Our whole mission is to provide care with honor and dignity for our veterans, and they do it every day, 24/7, and it's impressive. As I tell our fellow employees that a lot of times I see individuals who thank me about the soldiers' home, and I say it's almost it's a humbling experience, but it's also I feel really bad because I said, well, the ones who really need to be thanked are the actual caregivers who are doing the job behind the scenes. And I always try to tell them I will relay this directly to our wonderful staff and employees at the soldiers' home, because it happens everywhere I go. There's such a connection to the soldiers' home. It's unbelievable. I had a Marine family that I met in 2006, and I had a recent event with them 10 years later, and I found out at that event that the father who I knew 10 years ago, he was a doctor at the home when it was in fact a hospital. So it's just the connections are. I'm sure I could ask anyone in this room that they have a connection within 6 degrees of the soldiers' home, which is impressive. So one thing that we're working on, a new initiative at the soldiers' home, is what we're calling, I'm going to show it to it's carrying on the clock. It's a new initiative we're starting at the soldiers' home, which is, in a military sense, it's like active patrolling, where we, as opposed to waiting for a veteran to ring a bell or like just there or something happen, we go to the veteran within every hour or so just to go up and say, hey, Mr. Smith, or what can I get for you, or how you doing? Is everything okay? So it's something we're doing in conjunction with, we're trying to improve on what is already a good, solid care for our veterans, but we're doing that to reduce fouls and just to be better at our jobs. And that all came up from our junior CNAs on the staff, and then the nurses have the next level have a responsibility, and then the senior leadership. So they were the ones who came up with this, and I said this is outstanding. So we started that on November 1st, and it's a new initiative that we're doing, and we're calling it carry on the clock. So we're very very excited about that. In addition, like I said, it's just really a humbling place to be. Being a fellow veteran, every individual who's there, everything that's happened in America literally since 1940, of every major event, there's someone at the soldiers' home who went out and participated in it. He did the planning for it, or actually perhaps held a weapon in defense or execution of that strategy. And that is, for those history folks out there, it's a living history of America, and it's impressive. And I'm never surprised when I talk to one of the veterans of what he or she has done during their time in the Marine Corps. Went back to my Marine Corps times. In the military. In fact, the first, when I first got there, if I want to tell a quick story, I'm a lieutenant colonel, so I said, all right, who's the senior Marine here? And they said, well, there's Miss Ernestine. She's a colonel in the Marine Corps. I said, wow, a female colonel, that's very rare now. I said, so let me introduce her. And she's 95 years old, and she actually helped Dwight Eisenhower, then General Eisenhower, with the weather for the operation conduction of D-Day, which everyone knows the weather was huge. If it didn't happen that day with the General Eisenhower, we'd have had to wait a month. So here she was involved in that in 1944. So I said, I got to say hello to this, senior Marine there, the colonel. So
And you saluted her.
I did.
I imagine.
I did. I said, the senior Marine. I said, the other veterans loved it. It was just fun. It was nice because like I said, it's just a wonderful people to be around because you have a group of people who are very selfless, being helped and provided for by people who put them first, which makes it exciting to go to work every day. And I don't even consider it work. It's really just I enjoy going there and being with the veterans and my fellow employees. So it's
well, Colonel. I really appreciate all those updates. I just want to say that we're joined by Councilor Peter Tallman and Councilor Linda Vacan.
Hello, good to see you. Saw a picture earlier.
That's really how they look.
Yeah.
One of the really wonderful parts of the home and that is a canteen. And just why don't you talk kind of briefly about. I mean, there's activities there 365 days a year. I realize, but just some of the things that you do for veterans that are held in the canteen on a regular basis.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, you've been at some of the events that we've had there.
Yeah, many.
It's located. It's kind of like the epicenter of the service home because it's on our second floor, so it's easily accessible for all our veterans and our families. And it has an actual canteen, like in the military sense. It's got a kind of a little greasy spoon operation with you can get hamburgers and hot towels, also ice cream, which my son loves. He loves the ice cream there. It's got coffee. And it's a big enough facility where we can have bingo. We have performers come in who sing. We just recently had our Halloween party there as well for our families and our veterans. But also it allows for a place where we celebrate every birthday of our 6 services, not just Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, but also our fellow the Coast Guard and the Merchant Marines. So we celebrate. We have more celebrations there. We can also have, in a sense, town forums, and events where the state was kind enough to announce that $50,000 grant to us. We did it there with our elected officials and other representatives. And it's actually, there's something every day, which is nice when and a lot of the veterans that have the daily activities taped to their, with sometimes their walkers that they have and such, and it's posted everywhere so people know what event they're going to, and there's always something basically from pretty much 8 in the morning till close to 6, 7, sometimes 8, 9 o'clock at night. There's something for our veterans to do, which is really fun.
Colonel, thanks. Anybody? Councilor Sullivan.
Yeah, thank you, Colonel. Can you tell me how many veterans are on the waiting list right now, and how long is the waiting list?
That's great question. Our waiting list right now, I'll break it down to a couple parts. It's probably it's in triple digits at this point. It changes every day, so it's probably in the 125 to 150-ish area. for the waiting list, we break it down by need, so it's not like, pardon me if I'm sorry, well, I'll try to explain it. It's not when you sign up, it's who's in the most critical need of care, and that changes every day based on not only the veteran's health, but the health of his or her provider or family member. So the waiting list for our hospice unit, which, as you know, is for those in the most critical need. I'm very thankful to say that waiting list it's very minimum, within normally less than a week, sometimes within a day or two. Again, just by the nature of it, it's a facility that it's a part of the home that is designed for those who require more care. So we're very thankful that indeed is the case. The other facilities where the other parts of the home where are different floors, it could be 3 to 6 months based on the need of that individual, which is unfortunate. I wish we'd get people in as soon as possible. But it really does change every day, and every day there's a part of the day that we talk admissions, because we either send out a person from our medical staff to assess the individual, or that veteran will come to the home and we'll do the medical assessment there. So for an average time, that's something I want to find out. It's always hard to give the average time because you have the different categories, and I feel like I'm confusing you or talking too much on it. Where the hospice, it makes the numbers weird because it's really quick for hospice folks, but for those who for the long-term care facility, I need to get some more numbers on that, because I think you're asking Congressman, Councilman Sullivan, if you're asking for the long-term care facility, it might take 3 to 6 months for somebody to get in.
But if we've got 125 people on the waiting list for a 250-bed facility, I would think the average waiting time is quite a bit longer, and I'm not faulting you for that. I'm just wondering if the state is making any moves or looking at expanding the place or expanding the facility to better accommodate our more of our veterans. And it seems to me that number, by everything I've heard over the last few years with the population aging, that number is going to go up.
No, you're absolutely correct. That's always one of the first things looked at is how can we make more space, more bed space for our veterans. So that's one of our top priorities on how to do that. Don't have the answer right now on how to make it perfect. Like I said, I really think you need a bed capacity of 500 to have no waiting list. I look at it like this is kind of how we look at it. Very thankful that we have the 250 right now for the long-term care. Obviously wish we had more, and then that's just a challenge of trying to make more bed spaces for our veterans. The cities, I should say, they've been very, very supportive since I've been there of everything that we need, and that's definitely on the minds of not only us but on our sister soldiers home in Chelsea, of increasing the spaces. The last major space renovation was 1971, when they made the second, in a sense, the second half of the soldiers' home.
Yeah. Is there room here in Holyoke to expand the facility?
On top of the hill, yes, but it will require some. We're talking like making a parking lot, a structured parking lot of different floors. So, as you know, it's on top of Cherry Hill, so it's limited space because there's acreage, but it's sloped and such. So there's potential for that. They're talking some serious assets and resources to do that, but we're always looking at ways to try to make space inside the facility to make it more bed space for our veterans.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, David. Bennett, thank you, and welcome to Holyoke. And certainly, I think your opening remarks show a keen knowledge of the purpose of the Holyoke Soldiers Home, of the 2 Soldiers Home within the state, and certainly the runnings and operations of the home itself. And I couldn't agree with you more that staff has been an excellent history of good staff in that home over the years and good caregiving because of the staff. Hoyokers like to think of things as their own, and just the fact that it's named the Hoyok Soldiers Home, we all take pride in ownership, although we recognize it's a very large regional facility, a very important large regional facility. But we still like to think of it as our own, and certainly we're proud that it is in Hoyok. Wonderful location, and you actually, the last thing you're just talking about leads into one of the two, not concerns, but two areas I'd just like to talk about. The footprint of the buildings, the footprint of the facilities, the footprint of the parking lots are on top of a hill, obviously. It causes issues with water runoff. When there's larger storms, heavier storms, it can cause some real flooding in a residential neighborhood that is very close. A residential neighborhood that I think coexists with the Soldiers Home. I never heard a complaint once in 30 years of any issues between the residential neighborhood and the home itself. But it's something that if you and I know this is more of a state DCAM or a state, issue itself. But if you could keep an eye on that, anytime we can alleviate some of those water issues, it would help a lot. Any expansion, I'm sure we would work close as a city to make sure the expansion was done accordingly, not to have an impact on the residential neighborhood itself. And when I say there's no complaints, whether it's the bike run, the annual bike run, the barbecues, the antique cars, the outdoor activities, I think the neighborhood is coexisting and really enjoy it. We have done something new, and I work full-time in the probation department here in Hoyok District Court. And our court has become a veterans court as of this year. And it's up and running, doing very well. Not typical that a resident of the Soldiers Home would have any court involvement. Occasionally there is. But if you keep that in mind, I think the court would love to work with any of the residents that might have some court involvement. And the idea of the Veterans Court is to take veterans out of the mainstream, and to give them, or make sure they're getting whether it's the VA, whether it's the Soldiers Home, the care and help that they needed and services that they need. And at the same time, keeping the limelight off whatever brought them into the court itself. There's specific criteria and qualifications for an individual to meet. But just a couple items, if you keep your eye out on them, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Definitely.
Council Tallman?
Thank you. Thank you, Brad. Nice having you come down here, and thanks, Chairman Barley, for having him come down here. I think it's one of the first few times we've had the commandant, basically the Soldiers Home down here. And,
very nice.
Really,
I'm going to put that on Twitter then, on my Twitter page now.
Thanks for your service, first of all. And
it's the first time the Soldiers Home has someone that can Twitter.
No doubt about that.
I'm familiar with that. I'm glad you brought up the canteen and different events down there, because with the post office, we put on a couple of bingos down there twice a year, and I think several other agencies and Veterans Group put on bingos down there, and the veterans have a great time. And I think one of the best times I have when I'm there is actually, while we're calling the bingos, trying to chat with some of the veterans and find out where they're from, what branch they're from, where they served, and they really have stories. As you stated, they really have some great stories. Could you just go over a little bit about the building that is there next door to the Soldiers Home that's there for people, veterans?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks thank you, Councilman, for, I did not mention the name, I do apologize on that. Obviously, next to the facility, the long-term care, the 250 beds is our dorm, which, as the many folks here know, that used to be where the nurses lived, and there's a tunnel that goes underneath that they filmed a movie with Annette Bening, and, I found out there was a movie film there, that they used to, during the winter months, that they could get to and from the home. We're going to turn into 30 senior rooms for veterans, for a place to live, single, independent living for he or she to get back on their feet or have a permanent place to go. It was very popular before Surgery came along, which is another wonderful facility for our veterans, and it just helps decrease the homelessness of veterans. So it's another facility that we have. It's our smaller, our number 2 building there on top of the hill, and we have some administrative offices in there, but it's primarily for our residents right now can hold up to 30 individual veterans in there.
And that dorm basically is, as people get out of there, I mean, there'll be availabilities for veterans. Is there like a process where people have to go through that may need a place to stay that are basically out on the street or
Correct.
could, qualify for something like that?
You see, they apply for admission on that, and we allow them to obviously come into the home. It's designed for that because it's specifically for those who a part of their life where they can never have a place to turn, and it's a good alternative for them because he or she waits a place to be, and we can help them. A lot of times we sometimes get referrals from the VA and also from people in the community as well that this individual would be a good person to come live in the dorm.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilor Bacon, you're good to go, right? All right, thank you. Colonel, we heard the bells earlier, and the bell's going to toll for you in a minute, so I appreciate that. I was going to say, Councilor McGivern usually comes in to a fanfare of trumpets, but but the bell is going to have to suffice for him today. So I really, really want to say, again, thank you. You were so well prepared as always. Thanks for providing the background. Obviously, thanks for your service. We kind of made this as close to Veterans Day as we could. As most people know, a week from tomorrow is Veterans Day. Hopefully folks watching at home are aware that there are services here in Holyoke at the War Memorial Building starting at 9 a.m. It's open to the public, and with the ceremony it's going to start at 10 a.m. and it's really a moving ceremony. I know every counselor here has been every time. I've gone all my 5 years, so it's a really moving ceremony. So hopefully you'll have a chance to attend that one day, Colonel. I know you got a tight schedule that day. I don't doubt it. So with that, thank you so much, and we look forward to being invited in April to the 65th. I know a lot of us will
absolutely
carve out some of our time to come to that. It'd be a real honor, and thank you again. Okay.
And I just want to say thanks again. And our veterans ceremony is 1 o'clock on the 11th of November, that Friday. And to those out there listening, feel free if you'd like to come up to the home and help volunteer. We're always looking for folks to come. And it's everyone's home. It's not my home. It's everyone's. So it's really I encourage you, if you haven't, to come up and just spend some time up there. It's just for those who have had the opportunity. And I really appreciate the city taking the time to ask me to come down here. It was really neat, and it was an honor.
Well, hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again. Okay. Thanks, Colonel. I really appreciate it. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Just take a motion or to comply with.
Second.
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. Just to the committee, if just for your consideration, we have. All right. So we have. It's a deal of choice. We have a couple things with Marcos and with John Dijek. But we also have waiting in the gallery, Carl Eager and Tom Creed. So I was wondering if we wanted to take that out of order. Do you think that, Counselor? You think that makes sense? Is that okay? Okay. Okay. So maybe we just get a motion to suspend.
Motion to suspend the rules to take. Is it item 5 out of order?
Second.
Okay. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We're going to take that over. All right. So. Tom and Carl, why don't you come in? So this is order to members of the HRA and HEDIC meet with the City Council to discuss current and future projects aimed at supporting the manufacturing and industrial base of Holyoke. And so we're Marcos, you want to come in too? John, I don't know if you want to come in, you're welcome. So we have with us. Tom, you've been on HRA board for how long?
I guess.
Since the beginning.
6, 7 years. Okay, and I know you're not the chair now, but you're the vice chair. Okay, so with us is Tom Creed, vice chair of the Holyoke Redevelopment Authority. We're real honored to have you, Tom. Welcome as always. Carl Eager has been here, served here. He's a former city councilor. So Carl's.
I remember when you were in diapers.
That's not a pretty sight. And then Carl, the chair of the HEDIC board, and of course with us the senior staff at Office of Planning and Economic Development, John Dijek, and of course the director Marcus Marrero. So, I think this was a great order, but it was filed by Councilor Mike Sullivan, and Councilor Sullivan, you want to sort of take it from here? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Why don't you guys go ahead and start? I mean, give us an update on what's going on.
I would look towards one of my associates on HEDIC, who is I don't know if it is it? Yeah, I think it's an appropriate question, Councilor Sullivan. But I'm looking at Joe McGivern, who is one of your contemporaries as a councilor, who has been a member of HEDIC for long standing. I would like to think, or I would hope, that you all communicate with one another as councilors, because if there was any detail that was required, that should have already been shared. In this open forum, I'm not sure how much that we can really share with you. Let me qualify that. I'm an advocate of transparency, especially when it comes to government. It's a double-edged sword. Transparency, where I'm coming from when I sit as the chair of HEDIC, we are invariably dealing with, almost 100% of the time, proprietary information. That has to be respected, and that's why the statutes allow for us to have what's called executive session. Thankfully, there are times, not unlike this, where we have the opportunity with which to be able to share laudable generalizations with which we're dealing with. For me to get into any detail, I think that the best way I could describe it is, you've been kind enough to, I think it's only Redevelopment Authority, Councilor. I don't think I've ever seen you at any of the HEDIC meetings. It would be a good statement for me to say to all the councilors, including Linda, if I may call you by your first name, all of you councilors, you are always more than welcome to be in the HEDIC meetings. The agendas are posted, so you know what the subject matter is, not unlike what you have to do with yours in order to be above board. Only to the extent of when we go into executive session, and even then, it's my understanding, and I would stand to be corrected, you're even allowed, by virtue of being an official of the city, to sit in on our executive sessions. You would then, therefore, of course, be beholden to all the proprietariness that we have to when we're in executive session. I wear two hats, as you know. I've been privileged to be the chair of HEDIC, as well as I'm a member of the Redevelopment Authority. Tom will be the incoming chair. We have a stipulation that we rotate the chair. We just felt that that was the best way with which to be able to garner that everybody has at every position, and therefore has the depth of whatever we're dealing with as relates to the Redevelopment Authority. That's not the same with HEDIC, unfortunately. But I augur best in saying that we're very fortunate to have Joe sitting on the HEDIC board. And I've often said to him, and I'm sure that he must, share with you certain informations that are above board, that require that there be that degree of transparency, but by the same token, not anything that is sensitive that's in executive sessions. I'm not sure what else I can share with you. We're doing our due diligence. The agendas reflect what we do day to day. I hope that you receive those. I would strongly recommend that if you really are that interested, you really should come and attend our meetings where you can deal with specificity as opposed to my sitting here. I could, if you don't know me, I could ramble on for hours in terms of all the laudableness of what we deal with, and I'm not certain that that would bode well for either of us in this instance.
Just real quick, Carl, why don't you just hold on, Council? Yep. Why don't you just give, when does HEDIC generally meet, if you would, just so I get that basic information?
When necessary. We used to meet at least once a month. In this instance here, we only meet when it's necessary. when we have subject matter before us.
Oh, okay, so it's not like Thursday or
No,
something? Okay.
no, only the redevelopment authority meets at a specific time.
Tom, when does the redevelopment authority meet?
It's correct me, Mark. It's either the second or third Wednesday of every month, and it's traditionally every month. It's not always if there's nothing on the agenda, but it's traditionally every month.
Okay, it's the third Wednesday of each month at 6 o'clock, Tom?
5 o'clock or 5:30. It's usually 5:30 that we start.
And you're on the fourth floor of the City Hall Annex?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. And HEDIC is as necessary, but generally you meet at least quarterly. I know you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Councilman McGivern.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Carl. I think to Councilor Sullivan, but to the committee and to everyone that I think is interested in what's, Carl's opening remarks are very appropriate in that they essentially sum up what HEDIC and what the redevelopment authority is all about. The city set up both, slightly different statutes, slightly different ways that they operate, but with a lot of similarities. Neither HEDIC nor the redevelopment authority can do anything that the city council has not given to them to do. So the transparency is a lot deeper than I think just the issues of executive session, which makes sense, and that's why we set up both of the bodies, and I'll get into that in a quick second. But the purpose of the redevelopment authority, which is different than HEDIC, is operating under an urban renewal plan, which is very large and encompasses all the lower, I don't want to say neighborhoods and markets, but census tracts that, below, I believe it's below Beach Street is where the dividing line is at the moment. And what they do is they take on projects that are identified as part of the plan to redevelop that urban area. And that includes some residential, a lot of commercial, industrial plans and vision, and even working with the infrastructure of the city itself to accommodate what is a vision that I think we all have of redesigning downtown. We created a zone that goes hand in hand with the urban renewal plan, and that's the zone of the downtown neighborhood zone, which allows for coexistence of residential homes, apartments, condos, right within commercial buildings, which is not unheard of, but certainly not something that you want to see throughout the city, or you don't see it in too many communities. HEDIC is a little bit different, where each of the economic development projects are much more specific. Currently, HEDIC is wrapping up on some projects that have been there for some time, so Councilor Tallman and maybe even a couple of Councilor Bartley was not here when they first came in. And I think maybe an update from the staff would help enlighten us as to some of the projects that are still out there. The urban renewal plan is open. We all have copies of it right here, but they're certainly easy enough to get a copy. They don't operate neither body operates in a vacuum. They have to remain within the plans, and they have to do so in the open meetings. What Carl alluded to as executive session is very important because there's a lot of dealings with real estate. There's a lot of dealings with sensitive things that should not be in public until they've been ironed out and finalized. You don't want, if there's people that are bidding on a piece of property, or if there's people that are, wanting to buy a piece of property, you need to be able to talk, with some confidentiality, so as not to tip your hand with the actual negotiations themselves. But the most important part of both bodies are the members are tremendous, incredible. Tom's been around since the beginning of the redevelopment authority. Carl's been around since the beginning of time, but he was around when, I think Carl was around when we had the original redevelopment authority that went defunct back in the 70s. And the 70s was when Mayor Prue created HEDIC, and we kind of got away from both. Now we have both of them existing, and we're trying to debate, us as a city council, the mayor, and the staff, as to whether combining the two bodies would make sense. Certainly, HEDIC has accumulated a lot of assets in terms of property, the revolving fund loan program, and a lot of things that are very beneficial to their purpose. But the redevelopment authority, being new, has a great plan, but very little resources to back up that plan. And we're slowly helping, the bodies are helping each other out to go forward. There is a nice partnership with the Parsons paper in terms of money, and there is a nice partnership with, I believe we gave some seed money to the redevelopment authority about last year or the year before. But not to belabor it too long, and just to be clear as to the role I play, I will talk to anyone that I can at any time in the city councilors, but when Mayor Prue created the HEDIC body itself, he served as one of 7 members as representing all of government. When Marty Dunn took over as mayor, when Marty left for his state senate seat, he also served on HEDIC. I inherited it for a short period of time when I was the acting mayor. Bill Hamilton appointed me to stay on HEDIC to represent as rather than himself, and every mayor has appointed or reappointed myself to be the government person on that body ever since 1992. And I enjoy that. I enjoy working with the staff. I enjoy working with the members of both bodies. And certainly, I am always a city councilor, and I've said that in the past, that I would answer any questions about the HEDIC role or what's going on with HEDIC. But if I might, Mike, I think if I'm reading into your order, maybe just some of the projects could be updated where we are and where we're going.
Well, I'd like to interject a couple of things and straighten a few things out here first. Number one, I don't think anybody on these boards is doing a bad job, and I have great respect for the efforts and the time and that they're putting in. I want to be perfectly clear about that. Second of all, I did attend in August a Holyoke Redevelopment Authority meeting, which went into executive session, and both Mr. Creed and Mr. Eager were present, and I was asked to leave. And you were there also, Marco, because it was going into executive session. So now that I know that as a city councilor, I can stay, you'll have to call the cops to get me out. So,
Can I interrupt you?
right?
You're not allowed in. I've had the same issue with actually with the school committee used to go into executive session, and I was not allowed in on more than one occasion. I would suggest an opinion from the law department. I can get it from the state as to who can go in and who can't.
Well, maybe I should refile the order, and we'll take it up in executive session so we can get the answers I need, since it doesn't seem like anything can be answered here tonight.
I haven't heard a question yet.
There's no questions. I've asked questions to bring me up to date on future projects, and Carl sat here and told me that there's stuff going on that he can't share with me.
I just asked the staff if they could update us, and I'm sure we can talk about projects.
The update's not going to include things that are going on that can't be shared. It's going to be glossed over fluff.
Yeah, let me just interject. I think that why don't we at least hear from Marcos, and why don't you tell us first, since we're on the HEDIC topic, or if you want to mix them together, Marcos, however you want to do it, but tell us what's happening that you can share with us at HEDIC, and then HRA, and Tom, if you want to.
Yeah, I would like the opportunity just to, at whenever the time is right, just from the HRA
perspective. Let's just do the HEDIC part first, since we're kind of on a roll, and then we'll circle back to you, okay?
Sure, yep.
So you want me to stick to HEDIC for now?
Why don't you? Because we're kind of on the HEDIC board.
All right. So generally speaking, just echoing what Councilor McGivern indicated, HEDIC and HRA are both tools for the city. There's been at some point the city identifies either some problem that needs resolving or some advantage that the city has economically that should be leveraged, and so for whatever reason, negotiating, particularly on the real estate side, it's delegated to one of these two public corporations. HEDIC, as also indicated by Councilor McGovern, takes off in the 70s. There's a master plan from the late 60s that identifies one of the strengths in Holyoke being that it has vast tracts of land available for development. I mean, imagine that. Right now we're so land constrained because we're significantly built out in our urban core with significant commercial industrial properties, and we have a lot of residential and suburban residential on the western side. So right now that's not our reality, right? We don't have vast tracts of land for manufacturing. Part of it because many of those tracts identified back in the late 60s were developed and were done by HEDIC. Like I'm not even going to mention examples because I wasn't here, and I'm probably going to get them wrong. And even if I get them right, I'm not going to mention all of them. So at this point in time, the HEDIC actually owns only two pieces of land, one on Whiting Farms Road and one on Babala Road. The one on Babala is about 8 acres. Probably around 2 or 3 of that at most are developable because it does have wetlands. The one on Whiting Farms Road is 11 acres. Probably about 5 or 6 of that is developable. It is on significant grades on both sides. That's right behind the fire station on Whiting Farms Road. So these present a challenge, and not surprisingly, it's the last ones that HEDIC has on its inventory, and therefore they're not the best quality. The best quality sites were already developed over the years. HEDIC was a valuable partner in the Aegis Energy expansion, as the body knows. It exerted its loan program, which it's had for several years. The HEDIC loan program provides up to 100, although in some cases it's provided a little bit more money in govt financing. So over the years, a manufacturer wants to buy a new piece of equipment, say, and for simplicity's sake, let's say it costs $1 million, and the bank will finance a percentage of that, 70%, 80%. If the manufacturer doesn't have enough equity to make up the difference, HEDIC can come in and take a second position on the private loan and facilitate the piece of equipment for the manufacturer, which will create jobs and help the manufacturer expand locally. Right now, one of the one main active project that HEDIC has, it's a legacy project from over a decade ago, which is the Hamden and Pleasant site at the corner of those streets. It's just over 1 acre. It used to be a residential block. I wasn't around, so I can't remember. Did it burn or was it was demoed? Yeah, it was demolished. So let me go back a second. The way HEDIC operates is they have to get their plans individually approved by site, which is different than the redevelopment authority, where you can get a general plan approved, and then they can get a tenant or a developer for those afterwards. So the plan that was approved some time ago for that site called for a commercial use there. And so a tenant has a developer and a tenant has been secured for that site. At this point, it is a Dunkin' Donuts as an anchor tenant, and the developer is designing the specifications now to also have another pad-ready retail site next to it. So it would be one building with for 2 tenants. That would include its own parking, and they would have to still go through permitting. But right now, there's an agreement between HEDIC and the developer, which is Quabbin Development. They've been the developer that has had the rights to the site for over a year now, and they have an agreement separately with Dunkin' Donuts as the anchor tenant. So they will be going through permitting over the next several months. We're expecting something soon. I would hope by January we would have something to the planning board. They would also require a special permit for a drive-through that would go through City Council, so the council would see that when that comes through. So separately from that, what HEDIC has the ability to do at any given point in time is engage, as Carl was suggesting, in negotiations with private entities to try to put together a deal that then would have to come before the City Council for approval. So very recently, we were using HEDIC as a tool in order to do that for 1 Cabot Street. Unfortunately, we could not come to terms that were acceptable and that provided enough public benefit in order to bring a plan forward to the City Council. That's why the City Council never saw anything. Just nothing ever materialized. But it is a very valuable tool, and as I said before, in the case of Aegis Energy, when we started that project through the redevelopment authority, we didn't really envision at the start that we needed HEDIC. But when we came to a challenge on how to finance this to start the project, we're like, oh, well, wait, we can involve HEDIC on this one through their loan product, and that's what we ultimately did. So it's a public corporation, but it's, we can use it as a very useful tool.
Who funds the office?
Yes, and HEDIC also historically has been funding the Office of Planning and Economic Development around. Well, it's varied over time, but it's varied up over time, taking about 50% of the office's operations. That was discussed during the budget hearing.
Joe's concerned.
Tom, did you want to speak to the HRA?
Yeah, just my words would be brief, but just to give some perspective, as Councilor McGivern suggested, I've been on the Redevelopment Authority now since it was reconstituted, and the first thing we had to do was to build an urban renewal plan, write a plan, and ultimately get it approved, which was a process that took longer than someone from the private sector like myself is used to, but we got it done over a couple of years, and I recall at the time I was chair of the Redevelopment Authority, and when we had the plan in place, I remember sitting in a meeting with these two guys and some of the other staff and saying, okay, now we're going to execute this plan, so we need to put some metrics together. And so at the beginning of the year, what do our property taxes look like? At the end of the year, what do they look like? At the beginning of the year, what do jobs look like? At the end of the year, what do jobs look like? Because I wanted to try to measure the kind of progress and the kind of benefits that the plan was having to the community. And these guys were very polite, and they looked at me and they said, yep, that's a great idea, that's a great idea. And then when I was done, they also said, now don't forget, this is a 20-year plan, because it doesn't happen in a year, and it doesn't happen even in a few years. And the principal reason is because we don't have any money. And generally speaking, we were also dealing with properties that, were it not for a redevelopment authority, would probably not be developed at all, because they either need to be repurposed, they need to be redeveloped. They're not marketable in the private sector. So we need to use the kind of tools that a redevelopment authority has, and then we need to go out and try to find some money, either through grants or state programs or federal programs, to try to make these things happen. Joe did mention the fact that HEDIC was kind enough to give us some seed money that allows us to pay for some appraisals or some legal costs, et cetera. But in order to do a lot of the stuff that we want to do within this urban renewal plan, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, is the largest in the Commonwealth in terms of square footage,
yes.
We need to find resources, and that might take a year, or as anyone who's dealt with these plans before, it might take 20 years or 30 years, which is a little frustrating, again, for somebody like me who comes to the private sector. But when I do look back at the kind of progress that we've made, and Marcus and John can talk about some of the specifics, but I look at the Parsons project and at 37 Appleton and some of the other projects that we have gotten involved with, some of the minor aggregation of property that we've been able to do with the limited resources we have, we are starting to see some progress, and we're starting to see some momentum. I'm frustrated by the fact, and I guess this is healthy, that I can't point to 200 jobs that we've created in the last 2 years. But I am, and I think we are all starting to see some progress happening in the city of Holyoke, where we can see some of that job creation happening. And I hope that in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, that we're going to be able to come before this committee, and I hope that we do it on a more frequent basis. So, Councilor Sullivan, I'm glad that you asked us to be here, and I would like us to be here at least on a quarterly basis to have these conversations. I would like to be able to point at some additional progress, but and unfortunately, it takes money. And when you look at the Commonwealth and the federal government, it's very competitive. Our problems are no different than the problems that exist in Westfield and Lowell and Lawrence and in cities throughout the Commonwealth, and we're competing for those monies. And so a lot of the times, the priorities and the projects that we focus on are less based upon what we want to do tomorrow, and are more based upon, well, the resources are here right now, so we're going to go in this direction instead of that direction. So it can be a little frustrating, but at the same time, 7 years in, I'm actually seeing, I'm becoming more patient, and two, I think we're seeing some pretty exciting progress in Holyoke, and I'd like to think that the HRA and its partnership with HEDIC is playing a role in that. And in terms of specifics, I'd let you guys get into it.
Marcos?
I could add, if I may. So, as Tom mentioned, it is their largest urban renewal plan in the state. It encompasses over 700 acres. And so at that scale, what the authority decided to do was create not just base it on a vision of the downtown, but indicating some principles that would be followed, and then specifying 10 areas where land aggregation or real estate projects would occur. So of those 10 areas, several of them are in are in zones that are zoned industrial. However, because of the characteristic of the buildings, they're likely not to be reused for what we would naturally identify as old school manufacturing. Right? You have some of these old mill buildings that are 4 or 5 stories high, and they're just not apt for your modern manufacturing. Although they could be apt for boutique styles manufacturing, small scale prototyping, that kind of stuff. That only requires raw space. So areas 5 and 6 in the plan, which are around Dwight, Main, and Appleton Street, are in the plan, but they wouldn't be conceived as traditional manufacturing. In the vein of traditional manufacturing, we have 2 specific areas. Area 7, which is again Parsons Paper. It's the only one parcel that encompasses an area because it is so big, and I think the problem was so big going into it that it just merited its own area. I've talked about it enough. I don't want to bore you with the project. The other is Area 10, which encompasses the part of the downtown that parallels the river on the eastern side of the downtown. There are three properties identified there for the redevelopment authority. One of them, the redevelopment authority actually did not spearhead, but we were able to take action through the city, through the auction process. So we made sure that was 28 Water Street, and we made sure that the principles encompassed in the urban renewal plan were put in the contract through the auction, because we felt that we had an opportunity to put it out to market for the end goal that we wanted in the plan, and that's what it resulted. So the abutter was able to buy that property, Quantum Properties, which is aggregating the biggest piece of land in the downtown for an industrial use. So that allowed them to have they have about 16 acres right now. The other one is the old Hallmark Van Lines property. It is just south of Cabot Street. That one suffered a fire, right? And has some level of asbestos presence on the site. We are in a position where we're starting to get inquiries from a few parties, and we're looking into how we can either aggregate money or negotiate the best deal without having to put money into it. So we have a few options on the horizon, but nothing completely concrete yet. The third one is 37 Appleton Street. It's one of the 3 biggest buildings or sites in the urban renewal plan, along with the Parsons site and 216 Appleton. So 37 Appleton was John. What they used to make homes there?
Worthington
Compressor.
An enormous site that is unfortunately in a condition it's actually a negative value.
Right, it's of negative value. The estimate of cleaning it up is somewhere around $700,000 to $750,000. So to Tom's point, the redevelopment authority is charged with turning around these properties, and so we would normally we would have to get that money to clean it up. At this point, the redevelopment authority has negotiated a purchase and sale with a local company looking to expand, and very purposefully, because they also do this type of cleanup. The negotiated sale is for $1, because the value that they're bringing is, number one, they're cleaning up the problem, so we don't have to wait years and years to aggregate money. But they have a minimum commitment of 15 jobs. They're staying here. We're retaining the business, and their target is 50 jobs, and it's union shop jobs. So that is, to Tom's point of being able to point to 200 jobs, just between that one and Aegis Energy, you're almost at 100 right there. So that's something that we're working on to soon close on. The company is American Environmental, that's already located here in Holyoke. I think I'll stop there. At any given point in time, I'll also say the redevelopment authority, at this point, the mandate that it has, it's the current urban renewal plan that stops at Beach. There's no reason why it couldn't work outside of that. It's just that it has to get the mandate for it. So a plan would have to be put together.
To write another plan.
Right. The redevelopment authority would have to, initiate a plan, and then once the plan is complete, follow the same process that the prior plan followed. Right. So there would have to be a series of public hearings. There would have to be findings in the plan. You wouldn't take actions in an affluent neighborhood where there isn't blight, abandonment, or low income. There are some state statutory guidelines as to what constitutes an urban renewal plan area. And so assuming that you find an area that is outside of the downtown and it merits this stuff, then the plan gets put together, it's brought before the council, and it's evaluated, and if it merits it, the council approves it, and then that's when the redevelopment authority has the standing to act outside of the current plan zone.
I could add just a couple
McGivern.
things,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, and I think maybe John remembers some of these, but the rest of these are outside of Carl, are babies when they start talking about the history in the city with both HEDIC and even now the redevelopment authority. But if you go back to the Valley Mill project, and something that, go back to the days of Bob Bateman was the director of we call the community development at the time, I believe, office. And that project is the first one I remember. There were projects before that, but it was the beginning of a lot of things that gave HEDIC the resources it needs to do all the stuff it does, and eventually we want that to be able to piggyback into what the redevelopment authority is doing, because obviously it's all getting jobs, getting property back on the tax rolls, and making things better for the city itself. The Valley Mill project is a building that's very active now. I think it's 80% full if I remember, but it's something that's still successful. But HEDIC operates, unlike the redevelopment authority, throughout the city. HEDIC negotiated and brought with Freddie Rosencrantz and brought Mayrox into the city of Holyoke. Mayrox is the second largest precision manufacturer of dental tools on the East Coast. That was a Springfield company that was being displaced because of their dream to have a baseball field. We had a dream to have manufacturer and jobs, and Fred loved that move. His sons now run the company. That also coupled, it was a 10-acre project. It brought Homeward Suites as part of the project, not HEDIC, but HEDIC allowed that portion of the 10 acres to be developed and eventually signed off on the reverter, and Homeward Suites was built. HEDIC was involved with the Dow Insurance Agency building. HEDIC was involved with the creation of the industrial park, small, but known as Kelly Way. These are just some of the highlights of what these bodies can do, and looking forward to what the future is, I think is important. But just looking at the past and the history of what and it's not, when I say these bodies, I give more credit to staff. But I will say, and I've said this loud and clear to the city council, to every mayor I've ever talked to, and every member of the board of HEDIC and staff, is HEDIC is currently paying for 40% of the budget for the economic development office itself, and now what's called the planning board. And probably both bodies maybe use 20% of the staff on any given month or any given moment in time. But HEDIC is able to do that and do so because they know this office is very important to our needs and to our economic development plans itself. But we continue to serve it. The members of HEDIC, although there's a couple open spaces now, besides Carl and myself, are Mike Murphy from the Credit Union, Matt Manuel from the Housing Authority, Dave Bartley Sr., we recently lost Dave Healy in his retirement from Ty and Bond. I'm not sure if the mayor is about to replace that one in the order, but Tom, Carl, Gladys, Maria, and Pat all serve on the redevelopment authority. All recognized people from the city, I think, who give something in the efforts, give their time, but give their effort to make economic development on the forefront of what we're doing.
Jay Wellahan, Pat is no longer on there.
Pat's gone. Jay?
Jay is now the governor's seat.
The governor's appointment.
Jay, I'm sorry if you're listening. He's a governor's appointment.
Yeah, he probably.
I didn't know.
he probably is listening. No, those are good points, Joe, and obviously Carl. We appreciate all you do, Carl. There's no way around that. Tom, same with you. I hope you realize that, so.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, I don't know what else we can do with this, Councilor Sullivan or Councilor Tallman. If you have any.
Well, I got a couple more questions.
Oh, if you want to, if Councilor Sullivan,
yeah.
Go ahead. Sure.
Haven't had too much to say for the last 20 minutes. Well, let me ask you. Go back, Marcos. You mentioned Quantum Properties, and they currently own now 20 acres in Ward 1. What are the obstacles or the hurdles for interaction with a developer like Quantum? There's got to be some reason that HEDIC and HRA aren't more involved with them.
I don't quite understand the question. I speak to the owner, Glenn Shealy, all the time. So whenever he has an issue, we work on whatever's needed. We don't have site control of the site, so that's usually the biggest benefit of having a public corporation like HEDIC or HRA is that we can do site aggregation in a way that's negotiated. Whereas the city cannot negotiate a site acquisition or a sale, they have to follow the strict parameters of 30B. So if you don't have site control, there isn't anything to negotiate. I mentioned 28 Water Street, where there wasn't a negotiation, but we were able to put the principles of the renewal plan and understanding the condition of the building. The likelihood was that the abutter was going to be the high bidder. So it was a risk, but it did pay off, and they were able to aggregate the site. In terms of redeveloping the site, I mean, there can be a whole host of challenges. One of them is, what any big site owner would face in Western Massachusetts, which is, while manufacturing is having a bit of good news in the United States, it is by no means, we're not being showered by new manufacturing development in this part of the state, at least. Other parts in the South, there are areas where, auto manufacturers have secured vast tracts of land. Volkswagen, Toyota, etc. So that's always the name of the game. Can you secure a tenant or a buyer that's going to develop it? Changchun Railway, for example, was in the market for a large tract of land. Springfield just had by far the best site at Page Boulevard, was it? That site had already been cleared. It was number one. It was bigger. It was centrally located in the valley, and it had already been cleared as part of the casino development proposal. So when you have that, it was natural that they were going to go there. But those opportunities are very, very few and far between.
So let me understand, and I'll put it in context with the Chinese railroad and with Aegis. Yeah. If you have site control, and in that case, Springfield had site control.
No, it was privately owned. So I believe it was privately owned. I mean, I don't know all the.
It was privately owned.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll go back then with Quantum, right? They're trying to. They've already invested millions of dollars in cleaning up, getting rid of all the problems that the city faced, all the obstacles that the city had to overcome with a small 4-acre site with asbestos and remediation shit. I can't say that, can I? They're working at these problems, but there's no help forthcoming from the city of Holyoke with this developer. Now, is it because we have not got control of the site? Or can we be bringing the clients or the end users to the site? Is there something barring more interaction with this developer?
Well, let me. I think I know what you're getting at, but let me rephrase it, because it's not like we're withholding help from the developer. So yes, obviously it is the biggest site in the downtown. So if we we receive the same information as the developer does, but as I said, I'm always in contact with the owner, Glenn Shealy. So there are very few sites where we can accommodate certain uses, and so quite often I end up contacting Glenn to be like, hey, how about this use or that that use. They have had their own private dealings with anchor tenants that we have not been the ones providing to them, and I'm not at liberty to discuss what their dealings are. But certainly, when that aligns with reusing the site, we help in however way we can. Sometimes you have a tenant that doesn't have all the financing to go in, but it's an innovative use, and so we as staff and as a city, we can talk to state agencies to try to secure seed funding, industrial loans. Mass Development does the state industrial bonding program, where you can. If you cannot secure from a private entity the capital for a development, they can do it at a preferential rate because they go out to the municipal bond market. So in all those dealings, it's important for the state agencies to understand, is this something that the city supports, and we've always been supportive in that. If it's a matter of why isn't the city sort of funding it? We just don't have the funding stream for it. But certainly, what you're saying is true. I mean, they do face clearing the site, right? There used to be a lot of mills there, and so they're taking it down brick by brick, as you know, taking out all the asbestos and making it pad ready.
Yeah, and I just want to say, so the public knows, and the other members, Mr. Creed knows, and the rest, I have no financial interest whatsoever in Quantum Properties. So I just want everybody to be clear on that. And I'm not an employee of Quantum Properties. So I'll go back on the...
I'm concerned and puzzled. To cut to the chase, I know the owner personally. I meet with him regularly, but I'm getting a sense that maybe what I'm hearing and what you're hearing are two different things. Or am I trying to read too much into where you're coming from?
It could be that, or maybe you're not reading enough into where Mr. Shealy's coming from. I don't understand why this developer has come in, and while we've provided all kinds of tax incentive, while he is trying to develop this property, he has paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in real estate tax, hundreds of thousands in soil testing, other things at obstacles thrown at him by our Conservation Commission, all part of city government. It's been, from what I've seen, a horrible way in which a person, from Rhode Island has come up here and spent millions of dollars in this city, the very shallow amount of support he has received. It just seems to me that when you see someone like this come into town, it should be a much, much, much more aggressive approach to how we go about helping them. And what kind of a message does this send to any other developers that might be looking or thinking about coming in also?
With all due respect, you're doing a disservice to the owner. Okay, and I would strongly recommend you have a conversation with the owner. I'm not going to reference his name.
With all due respect to you, Mr. Eager, I've had those conversations.
Well, we're on two different streams here, and I'm very concerned that you're doing a disservice to him, because we have a very open rapport with this gentleman, and what I'm hearing from you is like there's another conversation occurring that has not been broached to me. He is not, I know him personally, I work with him personally. I don't want to go beyond it because there's proprietariness involved, which is what I started out this conversation. I didn't know where this committee was coming from. I didn't know where your order was coming from. But I am very concerned with what I'm hearing from you. What you're saying to me is already what we know. We do that all the time. What I'm concerned with is, and if I have to, I'll press the issue. Industry runs on profits. Profits are the mother's milk of economic growth. Through economic growth, we get employment and tax revenue. There's no secret that in order to get profits, An individual that is in business has to make sure that he's got control over his costs. One of those costs bodes well here, and it's called taxes. I needn't be the one to have to tell you, because now I'm speaking as a person who is on the front line, and I'm not paid for what I do. I do it just like Tom and the rest of us that serve on the board. We are frustrated with the fact that we are the highest, well, maybe we're now maybe only the second, highest tax city in the state. Worse is the terrible uncompetitiveness of our commercial and industrial rate versus the residential rate. I served on this board, so I know exactly where the problem can be resolved. If you want to start talking about what we do, we work with people. What I'm hearing from you, and that's why I cautioned you that you best go back and speak to the owner, because I'm going to be speaking to him also. And there's going to be a problem, a major problem, unfortunately. But I know well that we're going to succeed with him. But what I'm hearing here is maybe some grandstanding, and I'm not going to say that that is the case, but I'm very concerned. We're getting different vibrations here. This staff, Tom, the rest of us that served, are frustrated by virtue of having lack of control over the things that really negatively impact us here, for not only bringing in new industry, but maintaining what's here. And a lot of that, unfortunately, occurs here in this chamber. And I served in this chamber, so I'm very respectful of it.
Okay, Marcos, you want to go ahead?
To a couple of points from Councilor Sullivan. So on tax incentives, I do have to put out there, I've never had a conversation with the owner on tax incentives. None has never ever been requested, at least in my time. So if that's been an expectation, it hasn't been even communicated to us. One point I'll also mention about it, and it should seem obvious, but it is an incentive. It's not a tax abatement program. And I've made this point to other folks that have requested a tax incentive to pay less taxes, to control costs due to to their high costs that includes taxes. If I were going out offering lower taxes to the private sector that didn't need it, you should all ask for my head, because that means less income to the city that it needs to operate and provide its public services. It's an incentive, and we'll be presenting a package later on in the agenda today, where there's a win-win situation where if we don't provide the incentive, there is no project to be had, and therefore no benefit to be had. If we do provide an incentive, there is a project that will provide a bigger benefit to the city, and also a profit to the company. So I just want to make that clear, because while I do admire the fact that the owner of Quantum has done a great job doing leveling the site, and I don't doubt for a second that he faces a lot of difficulty, he's been doing it without an incentive. So for me to offer to throw the public money at it, there would have to be an exchange of public value in exchange for the incentive itself. And so that's always, in my mind, that's always on the table to have that discussion, but that has not been requested of us at all. So again, we have not withheld that, or we haven't denied it. It's just haven't been asked. The second one is on the environmental challenges. And as soon as a week and a half from today, I'll be meeting with the owner and Mass DEP. I know that there has been some orders filed around a financial assurance mechanism. It's a procedural permit that Mass DEP requires, and there are some things that are being negotiated between Mass DEP and the owner. Clearly the city has a stake in it, in both the benefits of any development and also the risks of any contamination. So we've taken a role in that and trying to see how we can have a win-win scenario.
Marcus, all he has asked for is a letter of support. The city council has given him a letter of support. He has asked for a letter of support from your office and from the mayor's office. That's it. He hasn't asked for any money, just a letter of support, which he hasn't even gotten.
I mean, with all due respect, I think I'm doing better than a letter of support, because I'm not gonna stake my professional claim on a number that I don't understand how it works. So what we're doing is actually supporting by getting into the negotiations with Mass DEP and seeing how we can have a win-win scenario where he can have the outcome that he wants in processing the brick that he has on site and can bring on site, but also that it isn't to the detriment of either the city or the public with a higher risk of environmental contamination. And so we've been in communication with that. We have a meeting about 2 weeks from now. So a letter of support is a pressure tool, and what I would hope the committee would understand is that any communication between myself as director and our office is a multi-stage game with the state. These are our colleagues that we ask for help often, and I'm not going to throw them under the bus because of one issue. So we've been proactive on asking for a meeting and seeing if we can get to a mutually agreeable situation.
All right, I've gone pretty much in depth on one subject. That let me go back. You guys mentioned HEDIC and HRA as planning on. You've been in discussions of a merger for how long now?
It's actually predated me. The consideration of having one public corporation instead of two. There seems to have been some history where there was one, and then there was a redevelopment authority that was disintegrated. A HEDIC was created. And so, going back to what I stated before, the needs in the city appear to be at the moment not where we have vast tracts of land available for manufacturing, but that we have this very ambitious urban renewal plan that responds to the current reality of the global, national, and regional economy. So getting the resources, consolidating the resources and the powers to do that is of critical importance. As well as when you consider the added bureaucracy of having two boards and having to follow two separate processes. So I would say early on in my tenure, this was something that was examined in I would say a couple of months. It was put on frankly, it was just put on the back burner. And probably about a year ago or so, maybe it was a little bit more than a year, starting to look at it again. There's multiple legal questions behind it. There are ownership questions behind it. And to be frank, while we do that, we still have a bunch of projects going on. So it's not something where we can drop all our projects to the public's benefit to sort of rearrange the chairs. So at the moment, it has been in the back burner. I don't think we've actively discussed it in any of the board meetings since, should I venture to say January, or something like that. It did come up during the budget hearings because I thought it was germane that the city council hear what the vision was to potentially move in that direction. But other than some initial due diligence, we frankly haven't been able to do more than that, because the projects before us are large and they require most of our attention.
Just to make it clear, it's not HEDIC and redevelopment that are negotiating a merger or negotiating, HEDIC is negotiating how to, if necessary, dissolve, but it's the city who is looking at how to handle both boards, not the boards. The boards are at the whim of how the city wants them to
and when you say
operate.
When you say that, Councilor, you say the mayor's office? When you say the city?
It begins with the mayor's office,
okay,
but has anything the mayor does in these areas has to come with the approval of the two areas we talked about.
Yeah, only to the extent that I have an opinion. I'm indifferent in terms of putting the two organizations together. My priorities are principally each of us have tools that we use today, and if in fact the combination of those two organizations preserve all of those tools and all of those rights and remedies, then I'm fine. I don't want to lose anything. And then even fundamentally, and I think these guys are probably sick of hearing me saying it, from the most basic perspective, if you put the two boards together, we're limited to 5 members of the HRA based upon the governance of a redevelopment authority. From my perspective, we lose 5 to 7 volunteers that presently serve as volunteers with HEDIC, and I would want to make sure that we engage either those particular individuals or people like them, because we just can't afford to lose the expertise that I think presently exists on the HEDIC board. So those are my primary issues, and I know that there are a lot of legal issues around it because of the way the two organizations are organized, and it takes a lot of time and staff, and I think that's principally the reason that it's not moving maybe at the rate some others would wish it did.
Would you like to see me file a home rule petition to allow us to expand that board beyond what the state statute calls for?
I don't think you can expand an HRA, and I'm more than happy to be corrected, but I think we're required under the state statute in terms of how our board is organized. Now, there might be other ways in terms of subcommittees and things that we can do outside of the formal organization of an HRA, but I'm not entirely sure that we could expand the size. And correct me if I'm wrong,
They're both
Marcus.
state statute driven.
Well, you know,
It's very specific.
actually, if I may.
Yeah, because we don't need to go down this road exactly at this point, okay? I mean, Counselor, do you want to continue your questions?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. All right. Well, that was a discussion, so we have an order before us. How would you like to proceed on it, Counselor?
Motion to the order has been complied with.
Second.
Okay, on the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Carl, Tom, thank you for your time as always.
Thank you. Thank you for
I look forward
asking.
to, you know, if you want to, I mean, I don't know about quarterly, but if you want to come down on a regular basis, you can certainly ask any counselor here to file an order, me included, and if you want to, same with you, Carl. So, I mean, you can file, any of us can file, and if you want to, and we can have you come in and chat some more about something.
Yeah, and I just, you know, I can't speak for staff because I know that they're, when we come down here, they need to come down here. So, but as often as you want us to be here, I mean, I'm more than happy to.
Well, what I'm saying is a two-way street. So
It's a two-way street, and I was speaking personally, but I think Joe touched on the right thing, Counselor, that get a ruling from the, would that be the ethics board, Joe? In terms of whether or not
No,
counselors
I
can,
think it's the Attorney General.
Attorney General.
is it
Yeah,
the
Attorney
AG's
General,
office?
yeah.
Attorney General, yeah.
But the law department can make the connection initially.
Yeah.
I'm sure they help Mike out. And I'm just speaking from past experience. It makes sense that someone who votes on the plan should be able to come into an executive
That's
session.
where I'm coming from.
But we used to vote on things, and I forget the details, but it happened to me with the school committee where I
Well,
was
why don't we just
nicely asked to leave.
I can't even imagine.
Sure,
I can't even imagine anybody asking to
Councilor
leave.
Sullivan.
But that's an order we can file. Okay, so gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and your volunteer work, obviously. So greatly appreciated. Okay, Marcos, we have. What do you want? Do you want to take these up together, Marcos? 3 and 4. Okay, so if I could just get a motion to suspend the rules and take 3 and 4 as a package.
Make a motion to take up items 3 and 4, suspending the rules to take together.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, that these we're taking up agenda items 3 and 4. That the City Council review the resolution for the Certified Housing Development Incentive Program project and local tax increment exemption agreement with AACO Realty Corp. This is for 380 Dwight Street, known as the Canal Galleries. Number 4 is the City Council review the resolution for certified project and tax increment financing, also known as a TIF, for AACO Realty Corp. At 380 Dwight Street. So, so with us we have Tessa Murphy Romboletti working the
working the computer.
Working the computer.
That's me.
Working the computer, and John Dijek, Marcus Murrow, and the folks from AACO, I would imagine.
What Thanks for bearing with us and listening.
That was interesting.
What do you think it is? I I mean, I think these are good orders myself, but now just hold the phone a second. There are, Joe, you've got a packet, Counselor? Counselor? If you would give this to Counselor Bacon. Counselor Bacon has one, okay. All right, these are extra copies then. I brought my own as well. Okay, so Marcos, I have the materials that you and John, or John I think sent, but both of you, I'll just put it that way, and I reviewed them, but why don't you sort of start the process, Marcos?
Sure, thank you. So, the presentation is short, and it's meant to convey, to summarize the numbers, which is the most complex part of it. But if it pleases the chair, I would suggest that we kind of hear. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to mention, if I could, I haven't had a chance to catch Marcos before his meeting, but in front of you there was a packet with a cover summary and a couple just pieces of information, a map of where the property is we're talking about. This is 380 Dwight Street, an assessor card, a statement from the tax collector's office that all city payments are in good standing. So I just wanted to mention that before we go right into the presentation here that describes the,
John,
the project.
Is that something you emailed to me?
That is something new that was delivered to Ryan this afternoon.
Oh, okay, sorry. So I didn't. Okay, so I don't have that in the email. All right, so. Okay, so you've got an assessor's field card, and what else?
There's a map of the parcel. That's the assessor card, yes, and prior to that is the map of the property.
Part of the packet.
Yep, the very front.
Well, it wasn't emailed. That's all I'm saying, Pete. So okay. I guess it's being added now. So okay, so that's a no. Go ahead.
So very quickly, what we have before us is a tax incentive package similar to what we did with the qubit. It is a commercial TIF, which is only on the marginal increased value on the commercial side. It's a schedule over 10 years. We'll get into that in a little bit. And a residential housing development incentive program for market rate housing. This one is for 5 years. So what I was going to suggest, if it pleases the committee, I would suggest that the developers who are with us here today, Mark Jarvis and Terrence Bernard, if they could give an overview of the project so that you have an understanding of what it is that they're planning to do, and then we can run through what we see as the benefits and as well as how the tax incentive would work as presented.
That's fine. There's 3 owners, right?
Yes, there is. Yes.
Yeah, so where's Mr. Scher? Okay, yeah, so, well, I'm glad you're here. Well, welcome aboard. So why don't you just take it from there, okay? So I just want you to identify yourself, so who's who, and then we'll go from there, okay?
Hi. Thanks for having us. My name is Terrence Bernard.
Thank you. And where are you from, Mr. Bernard?
I'm currently a Holyoke resident, and I am from Shelburne Falls.
And Mr. Jarvis?
Good evening. I'm Mark Jarvis. I live in Northampton. I work here in Holyoke.
Thank you. Thank you to both. Go ahead.
I think most of us are familiar with the property. It's there was an incident in 2013 that resulted in the building being closed, and the art studios that were in the building were emptied out. It has been empty since that point, and Mark and myself have since joined the ownership of the building and have been working to correct a lot of the problems that were on the property. There were some liabilities that we have since cleared and taken care of.
Like what?
There was a taxes owed.
Yeah, like how long didn't he pay his taxes?
It was a mix of taxes and money owed to HG&E at the time.
For how long?
I think it slipped over several years.
I think so too, right?
Yeah.
I think it was a long time.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a
building,
battle.
didn't pay his taxes, owed a lot of money to G&E, and now he's part of an ownership team that wants to get a tax break. Is that fair to say?
He is part of the ownership, and that is true, sir.
Yeah. So you can tell by I mean, I respect you gentlemen very much. Don't think I don't. And and Marcos and John know how much I respect them. So, but I'm not super psyched about giving a tax break to a deadbeat for years. But proceed.
Since we have now owned majority stake in the building and the company, we have pursued every means possible to correct the past tax problems and the past debt to HG&E. And so with that cleared up now, we're looking to bring the building back online from being an empty building down in a district that is starting to revitalize into something that can capitalize and help improve a lot of the benefits that the public investment has already made in that area. At this point, the building suffers from a large number of code compliance issues from being reopened, and so these, of course, are very expensive to accomplish. We're looking to reopen the first two floors for new art studios to reopen, as well as other possible small business opportunities, and then to create some living condominium units down in this district. It's very challenging to address the code compliance issues because they are, the building was basically left undeveloped or unimproved for 30 plus years. So now that Mark and I are part of the team, we have been for a better part of a year now. We have been working to figure out the financing for the project. We have been discussing with Mass Development and other banks. We had to change up our initial plan to be something that the financial institutions would be more willing to support. Namely, we had to phase the project. So what we're looking at doing is tackling the restoration of the building in two phases. The first phase, like I mentioned, is the commercial, and that helps us get the building up to code compliance and lets us return people to that building. After completion of the first phase, we are looking to develop out the top floors into 12 condominium units. And upon the completion of that, we would like to continue to reinvest the net revenue into additional properties that adjoin the building.
Okay, so what do you want from the City of Holyoke?
We're looking to at two things. The commercial TIF, which will help with, we're going to have to take out a pretty sizable mortgage to get the building up to code, and so we're looking for that relief there. Currently, the building as is does provide a small revenue to the city, but when it's redeveloped, it will have a greater value. And then we're looking for to be part of the HDIP program for the residential units.
When we initially approached the financing of this project, we did have slightly different plans in mind. We discovered through a series of negotiations with the banks that because of the nature of the building, because of some of the challenges that we all understand that Holyoke faces, there was a reluctance to get involved at that deeper level that we wanted the bank to have faith in and jump into with us. And so consequently we found it necessary to put our thinking caps on and take a phased approach, which was what the banks have requested from us. So consequently the phased approach that we've chosen to take is this phase one commercial on first and second. That needs to be a self-financing phase. That's to say it must be financially viable in and of itself. and we, once that is complete, and once we can show the financial viability of that, then we hope and expect to get the support of the same financial institute to finance the 12 condos on the 3rd floor. What we're asking the City of Holyoke to assist us with is the tax benefits that come with the TIF, as this is critical for the way the bank is currently looking at the numbers we are providing them with. They're very satisfied with what they see at present, but a large part of that satisfaction with what they're looking at and what we're presenting to them is a hope and understanding that the City Council will have a sympathetic ear towards the idea of a TIF.
So Marcos, do you want to explain to us the impact to the city?
Okay, so now I'll reference the sheets in front of you. It's 4 slides, and it's to my left, to your right. I made my best approximation of first 2 floors and 3rd floor, but the image is skewed, so my apologies. That's just summarizing what I indicated before. First 2 floors are the Economic Development Incentive Program. Over 10 years, it starts at 85% on the additional value, not on the base value. So on day 1, this property pays more taxes than it has been before. And then the top floor and attic space would be on the would receive a 5-year residential incentive starting at 100%, but this one would be different than the one that the Cubit received. This one is actually much lower, and after the first 2 years reduces dramatically. And I can go into the reasons for that. So as Mark indicated, it's an issue of cash flow and the risk. Without a tax incentive, just the pro forma, the numbers don't work. The project is in the negative. There's no sense for a bank to loan it money, so there's no project. If we like the building how it is now, it'll continue being that, right? So this presents us with a valuable way of getting it developed.
We don't like it the way, but at least it's current.
I'm being facetious. I know no one likes it.
At least the guys brought it current. At least we can say that. The deadbeat's out there somewhere, but that's okay. So keep going.
So here's the schedule as outlined. So for the residential, it's first 2 years at 100%, 3rd year at 80%, then it drops dramatically down to 40 and 20%.
Yeah, but Mark, so the commercial starts first, and when does the residential?
You'll see that in the next graph. So I'm presenting this slowly. Wait, don't go to the next one yet. So the residential would start. The estimate is on year 3 of the project. So think of the project as a 10-year, just for simplicity's sake, right? Because it would match up with the commercial TIF. If the project is 10 years, starting with when it gets the certificate of occupancy, then the residential tax incentive would kick in on year 3 of the project, because it wouldn't be built until a couple of years after the commercial one. So when we get to the next graph, we'll see that. But essentially, the residential is 100, 100, 80, 40, and 20. The reason for that is we're not looking to subsidize the owners of the condos, right? Once you sell the condominiums, these aren't rentals like. And I'm referring to the Cubit because it's our only other example where we've done the housing development incentive, tax incentive. In that project, those 18 units were owned by the developer, so the taxes paid on the units were on their pro forma. It was a cost that they had to incur, and therefore it was germane to them. When you sell a condo, the tax liability is no longer on the developer, it's on who owns it. The issue becomes, how certain are you that you're going to sell it in the time frame that you say you're going to sell it?
Yeah, how certain are you guys? So you're going to sell it within the time frame that you say you're going to sell it?
Are you interested in a condominium? We are.
Bring the mic up to you. You can you can sit back. But
I'm sorry. We are, we've done our market research. We've spoken with a great.
I wasn't obvious, but go ahead.
Well, I apologise. we're confident. Otherwise, we wouldn't be jumping into this. We have a great many people who've shown a great deal of interest. Just yesterday, I had someone run up and say, "Hey, don't forget, my dad really wants one of those condos." You know, so we have a database of people that are very interested. There is there's a community attached to this building. When the building was unfortunately closed, a great many people who had a great deal of passion for both Holyoke, the building, and the area were essentially obliged to move on. And to a greater or lesser degree, we've been able to leverage interest there. But there's also a great deal of new interest. There's people that we're speaking to in Northampton who currently own a condo that's worth $400K. They can buy something here for almost half that and pocket $200K and just add it to their pension savings. And who doesn't need that in this day and age?
So you know, despite their confidence, and I'm sure that they have done their market research, you have 12 units to take care of. You could be faced with selling 8, selling 9, and still be faced with still holding a few other units because of the estimate of how these units would be assessed versus the commercial space as they will be developed. Actually, the majority of the value of the assessed value in the building would end up being on the residential rate. So it actually represents, despite how confident one would be, and one would hope that this would be sold as quickly as possible, it can represent a high risk to the lender if they do not manage to sell them in those early years, and then the taxes in the residential year 2, 3, 4, and 5, which would be just add 3 years to that, right? That it could particularly damage the project.
Did you say the majority of this project is what? Is it? Did you say it was residential?
No, I'm differentiating between the square footage and the assessed value. So by square footage, the majority of the project is commercial. The first 2 floors. The 3rd floor is residential. But in order for us to do this, we have to confer with the city assessor to understand how these would be assessed for value, and therefore what the tax implications would be for the building. So because of the finished grade, if you will, of the condo units, the projected assessed value for the residential property is estimated at about $2.2 million, whereas the commercial space will be assessed at a projected $1.2 million. So the risk on what happens if you don't sell a couple of units can have a particularly detrimental effect on the cash flow of the project. So that is why in the early years of the residential, it is important to provide the incentive there, but also dramatically drop it down so that they also have an incentive to offload this. I mean, at some point, we are getting the taxes back.
Well, if this thing is really hinging on a residential cash flow, as you say, why would I want to support a 10-year TIF on the commercial? Why wouldn't I support, why does it have to be 10 years, Marcos?
So we're going to see that in the next slide, but I'm just trying to show you what the schedule is here because that information is not on the next slide. So on the commercial side, we're looking at a commercial TIF, again, higher in the first years because you want to make sure that as the developer is paying down the loan, they're not in the first years, they're not being damaged by the high cost of the taxes. So up to year 4, it goes down 5 percentage points, the exemption. After that, it goes down 10 points so that the city can recuperate more value. So if you were to combine those together, it would start out at 85 to 5% exemption over 10 years. If you average it out, it's giving the equivalent of a 43% exemption every year. Or said another way, they would be paying 57% of the tax value over 10 years without, when compared to no tax incentive. Of course, with no tax incentive, there is no project. So we'll go to the next slide because it seems to be where most of the information is desired. We have 2 types of bar graphs here. We have a green or dark bar graph, depending on how good a quality the the TV reception is at home. That symbolizes the income to the city. We have the yellow bar graphs, which represent the projected exemption on any given year. The red line represents what the current tax obligation is right now. That is what the city is getting right now on an annual basis from this building, $8,649. As you can see from the green line, first year, we get more than that, and it just grows after that. The reason why the yellow bar increases significantly in year 3 is because that's when, and I can already tell you I have an error on years, oh, nope, that's not an error. On years 1 and 2, the yellow bars are much lower than years 3, 4, and 5, and that's because the exemption on years 1 and 2 is only the commercial exemption. The projection is once the residential phase is completed on year 3 of the project, then you're accounting for both the residential and the commercial tax incentive. So to your question of when does the residential kick in, it would kick in when that certificate of occupancy is provided. That's estimated to be in the 3rd year of the project. That's why you see that spike in
So why
yellow.
can't we do an 8-year TIF?
If we did an 8-year TIF, we would have to structure it in a way that the income does not kill a project, to put it mildly. So we could do no TIF, and we could do a 20-year TIF, or anything in between. So this is what we've estimated that that is a good return for the project, but also it will secure the financing. The bank will provide financing for this project this way. If the suggestion is, why don't we give none or less, we could come up with a scenario, and the bank would say no. And in fact, I will tell you that this is a better scenario that we've negotiated than what was requested of us. What was requested of us would have provided the city with a effective tax rate over 10 years of 51%. This is an effective tax rate of just over 57%.
Thank you. Councilor Sullivan, you have a question?
Yeah, what is market rate? What do you anticipate coming on the market with these condo units at?
We're looking around about 250.
250, and how many units again?
12.
12. So, Marcos, this graph here that we're looking at,
yes,
is at what point are all these units sold and now paying full property tax?
They have to pay property tax whether they're sold or not. So if they're not sold, the owner they are the owner, and so they have to pay the property tax.
That's what I'm saying. So this graph assumes that they stay the owner the entire 10 years.
It assumes nothing on ownership. It doesn't matter who owns it. That would be the value stays the same. So the assessed value is what matters, not who owns it. So if they own it, they're responsible for the taxes. If they've sold the unit, whoever's living in it or whoever owns it has to pay the taxes.
That's what I'm getting at, is that it accelerates much more dramatically as they sell. Is that
it accelerates dramatically because the incentive decelerates. So as the incentive withers, whoever owns it is responsible for those taxes.
Okay, the tax incentive isn't transferable to the owner.
It goes with the property. Yes.
So it is being transferred to the owner. Okay.
Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, welcome to the chambers, and thank you. Marcus, I just want to compliment you. I think these numbers make a lot of sense. I've always been
you have one more slide, too.
What's that?
I do have one more slide.
I've already looked at that, yeah. But I appreciate the presentation so far, but my questions might lead up to that last slide, I think, or I hope. Just an opening comments to lead into the questions is, I'm intrigued by the residential part of this project, and the commercial part certainly makes it work. And I think you heard me earlier talk about how we created a zone that leads right into this. Yeah. And I believe the residential component of getting, what I'm thinking would be young professionals to live in this area, is what's going to make this area come back and the demand be even higher from entertainment to commercial to even industrial, perhaps. And it all just works together. And that's why I think it's important. I don't think I'm dreaming here. I think you've made a good presentation. So the questions are going to lead into the final question. But when you said majority ownership, I think is what you said.
Yes,
Are you
sir.
talking about 1/3 and 1/3, or are you two together?
I own a third, and Terence owns a third, and David Scher owns a third.
Okay, so you essentially outvote David if push came to shove.
That's
But you
correct.
you
Yes.
guys aren't partners, you're partners as 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that makes sense. The bank financing, I get that, I leave that to the experts, that, you know, the numbers have to gel here to get the bank financing. What is the private, you know, what private dollars do you have at stake? What are you putting up that you could lose?
Our futures. No, we've each made personal investment in the building to date to clear some of the issues that existed with the building when we started working together with David. So together, I have to say, largely Terence, we've sorted out the issues with back taxes. That's required a considerable investment. We've sorted out the issues with HG&E. We've addressed certain issues within the building to satisfy the immediate needs of the fire department by bringing sprinkler systems back online, updating valves, updating smokes, and life safety systems within the buildings. We've also made some changes to the electrical systems within the building to, again, make to satisfy the needs of HG&E and to bring ourselves closer to code compliance for the purposes of construction and redevelopment. And of course, we've both invested a great deal of time, energy, and passion.
And the future mortgage, what is that going to look like to pay back the loan?
Yeah, that's why the importance of the first phase for the commercial is that it is self-sustaining. So we are looking at a mortgage of about $650,000 to get the first phase accomplished, and so that commercial has to continue to pay for itself.
That works out at about $3,200 a month.
The values of the residential property, and when it says, I think it says split level,
They are.
but it's only on the 3rd floor. How does
Third floor and attic.
Yeah.
3rd floor and attic?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I couldn't tell from that picture. I get it.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
The units average around 2,000 square feet.
We see a lot of this happening downtown, and I'm not doubting your research into this, but is it there? Are they coming?
We've had a lot of interest. We feel very confident just from the level of interest that we get, and I know that my original thought process on who our potential buyers would be was young professionals again, but I have to say that we've been surprised by the greatest extent coming from retired couples looking to not be responsible for the lawn anymore and to sell their place in Northampton and enjoy everything that's happening in Holyoke.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
The values of each of the condos is going to be dictated by the sale.
Yes.
Yes.
And have you gave us the number, I think you answered the question of Councilor Sullivan, but can you fluctuate on that number if the sales are lower? If they're higher, everybody wins, but
Right.
if
Sure.
the sales are lower, are we still going to make this project go?
Yeah, we have some amount of flexibility. It's obviously we want to, the level of finish and the high energy efficiency that we're looking for bringing into these units is something that if it were located in a more prosperous city that's still doing well would sell for a great deal more. So while there's some room for flexibility for lowering the cost, we do want to try and maintain as close to that $235,000 to $250,000 level that we can.
And parking, I'm just curious more than anything.
Yeah.
What's the parking plans?
So currently on site, we've identified about 40 parking spots in what already belongs to the property. In addition to that, we have on-street parking and also the public parking garages just up the street.
Are you anticipating that some of the the purchasers will not have their own vehicle, will be looking for public transportation?
You know, I think that's a trend that's probably likely to continue, that a lot of people are more and more reliant on public transportation, but more to the point that we have a limit. We have 40 spots. We need to have commercial space and the tenant space. So I think our current plan is to provide a parking spot for each tenant when many households have 2 cars, and that may result in a car in the public parking garage.
Okay. We do offer overnight parking in the White Street parking garage.
Yes,
I think you're aware of that. I'm not sure how much it's utilized, but I think demand could make that even a more potential possibility, or more practical possibility, because demand could, you know, add some any safety issues and concerns. Yes, exactly. And do some things that aren't being done at the moment. But thank you for answering the questions. And Marcus, I'm ready for the next slide. But
Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. I'm just interested to know how much in the back taxes and the monies that were owed to HG&E you did repay back to the city.
At this point, I think that we have the repayment was about 23,000.
23,000, yeah.
And how much is remaining outstanding?
At this point, there is no outstanding balance.
And that was the taxes to the city?
Yes. Yes.
And what about HG&E?
It was all rolled into one because the debt from the HG&E was turned over to the city.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay. So it was a lien, and that was 100% of the lien?
We did work out a financial arrangement. The amount was lowered.
Yep.
From what to what?
I think it was, I'm trying to recall. I'm going to say 38.
I think it was 38.
38.
Yes.
Most of that was just interest.
It was just
Yes.
it was interest, yeah, not just interest, but interest.
Well, I use you're correct, not just. I don't mean to poo-poo it. I'm just saying I'm differentiating it from principle.
Gotcha.
I'm not going to say it, Marcus, so you know what I'm thinking. I'll hold it.
Hold on, Counselor. Hold on. Are you
So
set?
my next question is related to the sale of the condos.
Yeah.
So I get the argument relative to the mortgage and the financing scheme, et cetera, et cetera. But once you sell the condo, what is the interest and the benefit to the city of Holyoke to give a tax break to somebody who can buy a $250,000 condo when everybody else in the city is paying the going rate on their house, their condo? I mean, I'm not getting that.
Sure.
If you can sell your $500 million condo in Northampton, buy a $250,000 condo in Holyoke, pay the freight. I mean, I don't see why that transfers.
No, sure, no, that's a perfectly legitimate question and one that we anticipated. The issue is that it's a constraint that we deal with, that the incentive program carries with the land, not with the owner. Right, so that's just a constraint that we have that we cannot modify. So you'll remember that not just for the qubit, but the HDIP program that was approved locally was that any project that came in the first 5 years would be able to get a 10-year 100% tax incentive on the residential part. Because of the concern that Councilor Bacon is bringing up, we did not want to do that. But we were also recognizing that there was a threat or a risk from not selling the units. So, ideally, from my perspective, ideally, the tax incentive would be 100% as long as the developer owns it, if that's going to make the whole building go bust. And as soon as that they don't own it, it would be zero, right? Having the concern of not being able to do that, the other way of doing it is you split the difference and then you make it go down dramatically, which is what we've done here. So the more likely scenario is that it will take 2 years to sell, which is why it's at 100%. And then from that point, you take it down dramatically in order for it to disappear quickly.
So what if, okay, so this is all assuming that in year 3, these are built and for sale. So what happens if they're not built?
So if they're not built at all, the property right now is assessed as fully commercial, right? In years 1 and 2, it's assessed fully commercial, Right. So there's actually no assessed value on the residential. There's no added value. The incentive only acts on the added. So if it never gets built, there's never an incentive. There's never the added value, and there's never the incentive either. The incentive kicks in once you have the certificate of occupancy, once it's completed.
Okay, so if we're making this deal, and this deal is 10 years long, and it starts now, if they build the residential portion, say, 4 years in, is the clock still ticking, or does the project then take 13 years?
The clock starts ticking the moment that the certificate of occupancy is granted. So on July 1st, after that, then the new value kicks in. So say these are passed today and nothing ever happens with the building. There's never an incentive that kicks in, right?
Right. But my question is, it starts today. The first 2 floors are done. The 3rd floor isn't done till year 5,
right,
or 6 or 7. So is the clock ticking on the whole project, or does the 5-year clock start ticking when they build the condos?
Right.
I mean, can this thing theoretically stretch out for 15 years if this is 10 years for the commercial, and then in the 10th year they build the condos?
Right. Okay, I get it. So they work number one is they work independently, right? That's the first issue. So if it were hypothetically to start on the 4th year for a good reason, then it would just start on year 4. The second is this is a contract. So if they're not performing, the city has the ability to disintegrate the incentive, right? So it couldn't hypothetically last 15 or 20 years without review from the city, right? We would have to acquiesce to that for good reason. So let's say they did the commercial part, and it's year 9 and they still haven't performed on the residential. I don't know, hypothetical. We could decide, listen, this is off the table. You're not going anywhere because they haven't performed. The performance here is based on their estimate that on the 3rd year of the project that they would have residential. Obviously, like any project, you could have delays. You have contingencies come up. Maybe it's year 3. Maybe it's year 4. You're still inside that window, but there do come scenarios do come up where it's like, well, this is never happening. We can claw it back. Same on the commercial, right? And again, nothing kicks in until it's actually completed.
Right, but so typically, and I've only been involved, I think, in the one other projects. I think that's the only one that's been before us.
In terms of housing, yes. Commercial.
Yeah. So once we approve this, assuming the council does, it's essentially out of our hands. I mean, we're approving it and giving it to you to do the contract. So are there contingencies in the contract? Like, we have the reverter clauses when we sell property. So if we're doing this deal, I mean, do we have in it, okay, year 3 is your plan to build the condos, but if you don't build them by year 4 over, I mean, there needs, to me, if I'm going to be sold on the idea of giving somebody who can sell a $500,000 condo to buy a $250,000 condo and get a sweet tax break that's on the backs of all the people who are paying the tax, I need to be convinced that there's tight beginning and endings to it, because this is a really hard sell for me to people who are paying the full tax rates.
I don't see a reason why we couldn't clock it. We would have, normally we would have the discretion immediately to, if a condition isn't met, to pull it. We could put a restriction on, year 5 or year 6 or something like that, something that would be reasonable, so that, to your point, if to what I think is your point, if market conditions drastically change in 5 years.
There's things that happen that aren't under our control.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I'm not a fan of build it and they will come, because I've seen us build things, do things, and they haven't come. But I mean, I'm leaving it to their expertise to do their market research. It's not my world.
Sure.
On the other hand, we're being asked to assume risk.
So I used this phrase earlier in the night. This is a multi-stage game. You know me. I come before you every month or twice a month. The point is well taken. Conditions in the Holyoke real estate market could change, 5 or 6 years from now. If it pleases the committee, that is something that we can work into the contract, where, if there are no units started by year 5, this is something that could be pulled back, because you may not want to subsidize something that can already subsist by itself.
Right, right. And I don't want to be perceived that way. On the other hand, we answer to the people who are already paying the taxes, who are already screaming about the taxes they're paying. Let me rephrase that. So, thank you.
Councilor Sullivan?
Yeah, to Councilor Vacan's point about risk too, I'd like to offer my support in this fact and bring to light that at $8,000 that we've got coming in on this building right now, and trying to get a development like this going that's going to bring in $90,000, $8,000, that's not much risk in a city with a $125 million budget. It's well worth the shot. It's in my mind, it's zero risk. The risk is in not doing anything. So.
And I just in my skimming through here, it looks like there are some parts of the, at least the TIF contract, where if I don't know what his title is, but we'll just call him the vendor. If the vendor doesn't comply, it looks like the city can sort of decertify them. But you know, maybe to Councilor Bacon's point, that has to be specified as to a triggering mechanism. Sounds like that's where the councilor was headed, and maybe you can talk about that. I guess I'm just amazed. I just can't get over the fact that we're, and I get that they're 2 to 1. I get it, but I mean, talk about letting a guy off the hook. And you owe $38,000, and you got a settlement for $23,000. Did I hear that right, gentlemen? Did I hear that right?
Yes, sir. A lot of that was had to do with interest, like it was mentioned.
Because you don't pay. When you don't pay, you don't pay for years. Interest accrues. Gee whiz, what a shock.
Yeah.
Yeah, we weren't shocked by it. We were. I mean, we fully understand and sympathise with the views that you're expressing with regards to what happened on David's watch. We're part of the solution, though. We've come to the table with a solution which involves David. It involves David, and I can understand that may be in some regards a bitter pill to swallow, but it's necessary that it involves David, you know. But we are the guys who work every day to develop. It's actually our jobs here in Holyoke is to develop Holyoke and help Holyoke and bring Holyoke forward. Terence has developed 3 buildings in the city. I currently work at Gateway City Arts as the business manager. We are very much focused on the future of Holyoke. We are believers in the future of Holyoke, and that's why we've decided to take this effort to turn what is a key building in an area where both the city of Holyoke and the state of Massachusetts have made substantial investments to improve. We believe this building is key to achieving that goal of making the innovation district what we all hope it can be. So I really feel that we're part of the solution. We are driving towards what's best for Holyoke. I might live in Northampton, but my heart is here every day.
Okay, well, next time I hear a councilor complaining about you know, a sign not getting put up, or a piece of a sidewalk not getting fixed in a commercial area. Oh, we're, you know, it's commercial business friendly crap. You know, we can point directly to this. I mean, so the city of Holyoke does give breaks on penalties of interest. I guess we do it. I guess we do it. Sounds like we don't. We probably do it more than once, Marcos.
I
think not the first time we've done it, right?
I think it's important to distinguish a tax break from a tax incentive, and who's getting this, right? So this is an incentive.
I'm talking about the past taxes that were and penalties.
Yeah, and that's what I'm going to
remember this. Remember this historical point. That I think, I'm glad the councilor brought it up, because I wasn't even going to bring it up, but I'm glad it was brought up.
So, Mr. Chair, that's what I want to clarify.
Pretty significant discount.
So that discount wasn't attributed to the prior owner, right? The owner owes this tax, and the building was on its way in land court, and we know where buildings end up when they're in land court for foreclosure. On non-payment of taxes. So we would be, how big is the building? 60,000 square feet?
Yes, it's about 60,000.
So the city was faced with a 60,000 square foot liability, right, going that way. In comes an ownership group with credible development experience in the downtown, willing to take a complete risk on a portion of that, on their own equity. This is not a loan, this is their own equity, that they put it down, and if this project never materializes...
I'm not discounting that.
But the impression is important, Counselor. The impression is...
I thanked them already, and I appreciate it. I'm making the small point, but, well, it's not a small point, that this business-friendly nonsense that is bandied about here, that's pretty business-friendly when we give basically a 50% discount on tax and penalties that are due. I think that's pretty business-friendly.
Well, and it's also self-preservation, right? So we're faced with the possibility of not getting any of the 38 paid and getting a 60,000 square foot liability, or getting most of it paid by a group that's putting the entire 23,000 at risk, because if they can't secure the loan of the bank, they're out $23,000, and everyone can thank them for paying $23,000, and they have nothing to show for it.
Well, I guess the question might be to you then, why is the city going into land court to take on yet another white elephant? Is there a reason for that?
That is not my decision. So that's a different.
Okay. Well, then don't defend it. Don't defend it. I mean, it's a white elephant. I'm glad they're coming in. I'm not denying that, but.
Well, then we can have another discussion on what are the enforcement mechanisms to get people to pay taxes, but that's certainly one of them. I'm not issuing a value judgment on them, but the method that municipalities have in the state of Massachusetts to get people to pay their taxes is to threaten them with foreclosure, right? And so we've seen over the past few years how that threat has actually brought income in. Now, whether that should be always done or sometimes, or which criteria, that's above my pay grade. I didn't come here to argue that. I'm saying that the impression that's being created by, not necessarily on purpose, but I feel the need to clarify that the past owner that didn't pay the taxes did not get a break, and they're not getting a break on being deadbeat. All on the contrary, the city is faced with the condition of having to write off all tax income, as it happens every time we foreclose, plus getting a giant liability, or getting most of that taxes in and facilitating a project. And, you know, at the end of the day, we get to the last slide, which I wanted to get to. When you monetize over 10 years under this tax incentive regime, if you were to take that income stream and turn it into today's dollars, right? What would it look like if we were to get a check today? It would look like $308,000 additional money. Because of course we know that money's discounted over time. It's better to have $1 today than $1 in the future. So that would be 418% increase to the income of the city. That's a pretty good deal. That's my pitch.
Well done. Councilman McGivern.
One question I forgot to ask. Will you be seeking or using any tax credits on the state level?
There's an abandoned building tax credit that is not a saleable tax credit, but because the building has been empty for over 3 years, we are eligible for that particular tax credit. And that's up to 10% of the investment into the building.
Okay, but you don't have to promise anything in return for that other than what reality is.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Just some thoughts, Mr. Chairman, if there's no more questions.
There's
no question.
Oh, okay.
No question, just had a statement. So you go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Councilor Vega made a good point, Marcus. I think maybe around that 5th, 6th year, some fail-safe mechanism does have to be built in. I'm intrigued by the residential. I think it's important. But the condos do add a whole different aspect to it, because when you buy a condo, you're buying, and I'm not sure how it works in this type of property, but you're buying from the inside, and the outside is responsible because you're not going to own the whole property. So there's still going to be liability, the roof, right, the common ways, the whatever, you know, getting people back and forth, the commercial part is all going to be part of what the mortgage and what the loan, and what I'm really also intrigued by is the $2.8 million investment, which I think is a win no matter how you look at it. But I think that's, you know, good point, Linda. I think that fail-safe, you know, somewhere mechanism is important. Marcus, you could not have said it better. The solution, you know, this is the future. You know, no one's happy about the past whenever that happens. But and no, I don't think the city wants to take property. I hope the city doesn't want to take property. But if you read the way the statutes are, at some time we're forced to take property. that sometimes we assume property even if we don't take it in land court, or we assume the liability itself. The gas and electric didn't just put a lien on the property. They shut the electricity off, they shut the gas off. I'm assuming the water was shut off. I'm assuming the sewer might have been working, but what good's the sewer if you got no water to flush it out? The roof, 2 years vacant. It needs a new roof.
Yep.
It sounds like 4 years from now, we're not looking at anything that can be rehabbed. Maybe 6 years, without some type of patchwork. But we've seen this happen time and time again. If you don't have a roof on it, you can't mothball it. It's not even worth it. I don't know if you guys are financial geniuses or didn't want to just wait for us to own the property and take it without paying all these taxes back. But if they waited, the gas and electric would have got no money. The water department would have got no money. The sewer department, DPW, would have got no money. So it's not perfect, but I like to spin the future, and I think it's a bright future, especially if you can make the residential part work. And I think it does have potential, and I thank you for your vision. And Mr. Chairman, I'll be voting in favor of both the requests before us. Make a motion that we adopt it.
Hold on, Councilor Tallman, do you want to make a quick comment?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, and I understand what you stated about the back taxes, and Councilor Bacon, I agree with you too about that, trying to get that in there 4 or 5 year for the investment, for the condos. But these gentlemen came in, and you say your heart's here in Holyoke, you live in Northampton, and I see that, and you invested already in properties here, so I want to see something than nothing. I don't want to see another building fall apart, and this is. It is tough to, to vote for these things, and I know you're getting breaks, and, people down the road, you're saying, well, why are you getting everybody breaks? But I think you have to, invest, you have to give a break sometimes to make this work. We did that with Cubit, I think, too. For the bank to say, hey, this is the only way this is going to work. And I want to see something work in the city, especially down in that area which is starting to come to life, and you see that. And I see you have a vision, and that's important to have an outlook in the city, in this community, that you're willing to take a risk and take a chance and something happening here. And I'm also willing to say to you that I'm behind this, and I wish you the best in this project, and I will be voting in favor of this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Reagan?
I just have a technical question, because you've taken up items 3 and 4 together. And it looks like we've only been talking about item 4. Is item 3 a completely different tax?
I don't know. I haven't seen the agenda.
One is a TIE versus a TIF.
Oh, okay.
And we took them up together. I just want to make sure we're just talking about 2 TIFs.
So the EDIP is what is formally known, is the formal name for the state program for the commercial TIF. And then the HDIP is a formal name for the residential TIF.
Right, but
so they operate in the.
First one's a housing.
Item 3 is residential, and item 4 is the commercial.
Right.
Oh, okay. All right, because we've been talking about everything as a TIF.
Well, yeah, we haven't.
This
do you say tie?
Tie.
This articulated it.
It doesn't sound right.
Because. In Massachusetts, it's the only place where they call marginal tax exemption a TIF. It's actually, everywhere else in the United States, tax incentive financing is something else completely. It's a way to actually finance public infrastructure with increased taxes, not to reduce taxes. So when they did the housing, the housing law, which is newer, they actually called it something rational rather than TIF. They call it tax incentive, exemption, right? Because it is an exemption. It's not finance. We're not financing anything with a TIF, but that's what they've called it.
Well, the answer is we pay people in Boston just to come up with new names.
Yes. And I just want to make the comment that I find the TIF a necessary tool because our tax rates are so out of whack in the city, because our budget growth has exceeded the growth of the city for at least a decade. So I do see it as a necessary tool to support people who are interested in investing in the city. But I always take a conservative approach to it, because the people that are paying the taxes are the ones that are actually supporting this vote that we take on their behalf. So I take a cautious approach to the projects, but I do appreciate your investment in the city. So
Thank
don't
you.
take it that I
Councilman
don't.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I make a motion that we adopt item 3, the TIE, and that we adopt item 4, the TIF.
Second.
Okay, on the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay, thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you, Marcos. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
I don't, seeing a late hour, I just rather just table item
For
6.
five, six, yeah,
6 for right
table.
now, and we'll take, we're gonna, this body's gonna meet again
December? Is it first or third?
December 1st. Okay, so we'll just take this up December 1st.
Make a
So-
motion to table item 6, leave on the table.
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Another motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.